My name is Emily and I'm 29. I was standing outside my parents' bedroom about to share my big promotion news when their voices stopped me cold. They were talking to my brother Nathan, promising he'd never face his debts because I'd pay them. Me, the reliable one. It felt like a punch shattering every memory of our family's love. I clutched a photo of us as kids, my heart sinking. Have you ever been blindsided by those you trust most? Share where you're watching from below, and please like and subscribe to join my journey through this betrayal. I slipped downstairs, my bare feet cold against the hardwood, and sank into a kitchen chair. The clock ticked past midnight, but sleep was a stranger. My parents' words looped in my head. They'd make me pay for Nathan's debts. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling, and texted Sarah. Just heard something awful. Need to talk. Her reply came fast. Call me. Now. I hesitated, staring at the screen, my thumb hovering. What if saying it out loud made it real? The kitchen was dark, save for the fridge's hum and a sliver of moonlight cutting through the blinds. I wrapped my sweater tighter, feeling smaller than I had in years. Sarah picked up on the second ring. Em, what's wrong? Her voice was sharp, like she'd been waiting for bad news. I spilled it all, my voice low, as if my parents might hear from upstairs. They said they'd make me cover Nathan's debts. Like it's my job. Sarah sucked in a breath. That's messed up. You've been bailing them out forever. I nodded, though she couldn't see, and my eyes stung. Forever felt right. I thought of my childhood, always in Nathan's shadow. At 10, I saved my allowance for a new sketch pad, but Nathan needed cleats for soccer, so Mom took my cash. He'll pay you back, she'd said. He didn't. At 16, I worked weekends at a diner to afford college applications. Nathan got a car. He's got big dreams, Dad explained, like my dreams were too small to matter. I stood and paced the floor, creaking under me. I don't get it, Sarah. Why me? I'm the one who shows up, who pays bills on time. My voice cracked and I hated it. Sarah was quiet, then said, They know you won't say no. You're too good. Too good. It sounded like a curse. I leaned against the counter, staring at a stack of mail. A bill peeked out, addressed to my parents, stamped overdue. My stomach twisted. Had I paid that too? I rummaged through a drawer, my hands landing on an old journal, its edges worn. I flipped it open, landing on a page from high school. Nathan borrowed $50 for a concert. Said he'd pay me back by Friday. Friday never came. I'd forgotten that. Or maybe I'd chosen to. The memory burned sharp and raw. How many times had I let him slide? How many times had my parents let him? Sarah's voice cut through. You need to call them out. Tonight. I froze, my pulse hammering. Confront them, the thought made my chest tight. What if they got mad? What if they chose Nathan over me? I mumbled something about needing time and hung up, promising to call tomorrow. But I didn't want tomorrow. I wanted answers now. I crept to the living room where my purse sat on the couch. Inside was my checkbook, a record of every loan I'd given my parents. $500 for home repairs last month. $200 for groceries before that. I flipped through, my heart sinking. The numbers added up, but the reasons didn't. Repairs. Their house looked fine. Groceries. They'd hosted a barbecue last week. Nathan grinning with a beer in hand. I sank onto the couch, the checkbook heavy in my lap. Were they giving my money to him? A car's headlights swept across the window and I stiffened. Nathan's SUV. My parents' voices drifted down, bright and warm, calling me upstairs. Emily, honey, come say hi. Like nothing was wrong. Like they hadn't just plotted to bleed me dry. I stood, my legs shaky, and tucked the checkbook away. I couldn't face them yet. But as Nathan's laugh echoed through the house, something in me hardened. I wasn't ready to break, but I was close. I stood frozen in the living room, Nathan's laugh grating like sandpaper. My parents' voices called again, sweeter now, urging me upstairs. I shoved the checkbook into my purse and took a shaky breath. I couldn't hide forever. My feet dragged as I climbed the steps, each one heavier than the last. The hallway smelled of Mom's lavender candles, a scent that used to mean home, but now felt like a lie. I paused outside their door, my hand hovering over the knob. Inside, Nathan sprawled on the recliner, his boots propped on the coffee table. Mom fussed over a tray of cookies, and Dad flipped through a sports magazine, nodding as Nathan rambled about some new investor. They looked so normal, so happy, like a family I wasn't part of. I forced a smile, my lips tight, and sat on the edge of the couch. "Hey, Em," Nathan said, barely glancing up. "You look beat." "Long shift?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "Yeah. Busy day." My voice sounded foreign thin. Mom handed me a cookie, her eyes soft. "You work too hard, honey. You should take a break." Her words stung like she hadn't just planned to drain me dry. I stared at the cookie, its chocolate chips blurring as my mind raced. Did she mean it? Or was this part of the act? Nathan launched into a story about a deal he'd almost closed his hands, waving his grin wide. Dad chuckled proud, and Mom clapped like he'd won an award. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. How could they sit there laughing when they'd sold me out? I wanted to scream, to demand why I was always the one who paid. But my tongue felt heavy, glued to the roof of my mouth. I glanced at the bookshelf where a framed photo of us at the lake caught my eye. I was 12, holding a fish I'd caught, grinning ear to ear. Nathan stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders, but I remembered that day. He'd taken credit for baiting my hook, and Dad had bragged about his little fisherman all summer. My chest ached. Even then, I'd been invisible. Mom's voice snapped me back. "Emily, we were just talking about Nathan's car. The payment's due and things are tight." She sighed, her eyes pleading. "Could you help out?" Just this once, Nathan leaned forward, his smile practiced. "Yeah. Em, you're the best. I'll get you back." His words were smooth like always, but they landed like bricks. I stared at him, my pulse loud in my ears. He didn't even blink. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Dad cleared his throat. "It's family, Emily. We all pitch in." His tone was firm, like I owed them. I thought of my savings, the house I'd dreamed of, the late nights I'd worked to build that nest egg. They were asking me to give it up again for Nathan's mess. My hands shook and I tucked them under my thighs, hiding the tremor. I mumbled something about checking my account and stood, my legs wobbly. Nathan clapped me on the shoulder as I passed, his touch too familiar, too casual. "Thanks, sis. Knew I could count on you." I forced a nod and slipped out, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack. Downstairs, I grabbed my coat and keys, needing air, needing space. Outside, the night was crisp, the stars sharp against the sky. I walked to my car, my breath fogging in the cold. My phone buzzed Sarah again, asking if I'd confronted them. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to the hospital, where my locker held a spare uniform and a quiet break room. I sat on a bench, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and pulled out my phone. My bank app showed my savings dwindling, but still mine. For now. A janitor. Marcus passed by, his mop squeaking on the tile. He nodded, his eyes kind. "Rough night?" he asked. I shrugged, not trusting my voice. He sat across from me, uninvited, but welcome. "My sister used to lean on me," he said, his voice low. "Always needed something. Money, time, you name it. I cut her off last year. Hardest thing I ever did." I looked at him, his words sinking in. "Was it worth it?" I asked. He smiled, sad but sure. "Yeah. Found out who I was without her weight." I leaned back, Marcus's story stirring something in me. I thought of my parents' voices, their plan, their ease in using me. The hospital was quiet, but my mind roared. I opened my purse and found a crumpled receipt from last week, a coffee run for Mom paid with my card. I'd thought nothing of it then. Now it felt like evidence. I stuffed it back, my resolve hardening. I wasn't ready to fight, but I was done pretending everything was fine. I sat in my car outside my parents' house, the engine idling, my hands gripping the wheel. It was Sunday and Mom had insisted on a family dinner, her voice chipper over the phone like nothing was wrong. I'd spent 2 days dodging their calls, replaying Marcus's words about his sister, feeling the weight of my own silence. I could still hear Nathan's laugh, his casual, "Thanks, sis," like my life was his ATM. I cut the engine and stepped out, my stomach knotted tight. Inside the dining room smelled of roasted chicken and garlic, a spread that screamed effort. Nathan was already there, leaning back in his chair, a glass of wine in hand. He wore a crisp shirt too expensive for someone supposedly broke. Mom bustled in with a platter, smiling wide while Dad carved the meat, humming softly. It looked like a postcard family, but I felt like an outsider staring through glass. "Emily, you made it," Mom said, her eyes bright as she hugged me. Her warmth felt hollow and I stiffened, pulling back too fast. She didn't notice, or maybe she didn't care. I sat across from Nathan, my fork heavy in my hand. He launched into a story about a new business pitch, his voice loud, confident like he hadn't asked me to cover his car payment days ago. Dad nodded along, chuckling, while Mom beamed, hanging on his every word. I poked at my potatoes, my appetite gone. Their laughter grated, each sound a reminder of their plan to use me. I glanced at Nathan's girlfriend Lily sitting beside him, her blonde hair catching the light. She was new, barely a month into dating him, and her smile seemed genuine, unaware of the mess she'd stepped into. Around her neck hung Mom's pearl necklace, the one I'd saved for months to buy for her 60th birthday. My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading. Had Mom given it to her? Or had Nathan Lily caught my stare and touched the pearls, blushing? "Oh, Nathan gave me this. Said it was a family heirloom." Her voice was soft, proud. Nathan smirked, sipping his wine, not even glancing my way. I gripped my napkin, my knuckles white. An heirloom. That was my gift, my sacrifice handed off like it meant nothing. I wanted to rip it from her neck, to scream that it wasn't his to give. Mom changed the subject, asking about my work, but her tone was distracted, like she was checking a box. I mumbled about a tough shift, my words flat. Nathan cut in, bragging about a luxury resort he'd booked for him and Lily. "Just a little getaway," he said, winking. Lily giggled, oblivious, while Dad clapped him on the shoulder. "That's my boy. Living big." I stared at my plate, my fork trembling. A getaway. While they begged me for his car payment. The room felt smaller, the air thick. I thought of my savings, the house I'd dreamed of, the late nights I'd worked to afford it. They were throwing my future away for Nathan's vacation. My throat burned, but I swallowed it down, my silence louder than their chatter. Mom leaned over, her voice low. "Emily, about that car payment. It's just $800. You know how tight things are." Her eyes were soft, pleading, like I was the answer to their prayers. I froze, my fork clattering against the plate. Nathan looked up, his smile easy practiced. "Yeah, Em, you're the rock. Always got our backs." His words were a blade sharp and careless. I wanted to fling my plate at him, to tell them I knew their plan, that I wasn't their bank. But my voice caught trapped behind years of being the good daughter. Dad cleared his throat. "It's just family helping family, Emily. You understand." I didn't understand. I didn't want to. My eyes darted to Lily, still touching those pearls, then to Mom, who looked away, fussing with her napkin. Nathan's smirk grew, like he knew I'd cave. The table blurred, my pulse pounding in my ears. I stood my chair, scraping loud against the floor. "I need some air," I muttered, my voice barely mine. I stumbled to the back porch, the screen door slamming behind me, my heart a tangled mess of anger and hurt. The porch was cold, the night air biting at my skin as I leaned against the railing. My breath came in shallow bursts, each one a fight to keep the tears down. Inside their voices carried Nathan's laugh, mixing with Mom's chatter, like I hadn't just fled the table. I wrapped my arms around myself, the ache in my chest spreading heavy as stone. They didn't even come after me. Not one of them. I paced the wooden boards, my sneakers scuffing softly. The backyard stretched dark beyond the porch light, where fireflies blinked like tiny betrayals. I thought of Marcus, his story, about cutting off his sister, how he'd found peace. But peace felt impossible now, with Nathan's smirk burned into my mind, with Mom's pleading eyes, and Dad's firm "family helps family." They weren't asking me to help. They were demanding I erase myself for him. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, hoping for Sarah. It was a bank alert, a withdrawal from my checking account, $200 labeled family expenses. My stomach dropped. I hadn't authorized that. I logged in, my fingers clumsy, and saw the linked account, my parents. They'd had access since I was a teen for emergencies. I scrolled through the history, my heart racing. 50 here, 100 there, all small enough to miss, all funneled to them. How long had this been happening? I sank onto the porch steps, the wood creaking under me. The stars above blurred, and I wiped my eyes, angry at the tears. I thought of my apartment, the lease I'd signed to feel independent, the overtime shifts I'd taken to save. All of it slipping through my fingers straight to Nathan's hands. I pictured him at that resort sipping cocktails with Lily while I scraped by. My sacrifice wasn't even a footnote in their story. The screen door squeaked, and Dad stepped out, his shadow long across the porch. "You okay, Em?" His voice was gentle, but it felt like a trap. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He sat beside me, the space between us heavy. "You left dinner in a hurry. Something wrong?" I stared at my hands, the question twisting like a knife. Did he know I'd heard them? Was this his way of smoothing it over? I opened my mouth, the truth clawing to get out, but fear stopped me. What if he lied? What if he chose Nathan again? "Just tired," I said, my voice flat. He sighed, patting my knee. "You're our rock, Emily. Nathan's got potential, but you're stable. You get that right, stable." The word landed like a slap. Stable meant invisible, meant my dreams didn't matter. I nodded again, my throat tight, hating myself for it. Dad stood, his knees creaking, and went back inside. The door shut, and their laughter started up again, louder now, like I'd never left. I pulled my knees to my chest, my phone still open to the bank app. Another alert popped up, a pending transfer, $500 to Nathan's account. My breath caught sharp and painful. They weren't just asking anymore. They were taking. I stood, my legs shaky, and walked to the edge of the yard where the grass met the woods. My hands trembled as I gripped my phone, the screen glowing in the dark. I wanted to call Sarah, to scream, to drive away and never come back. But I didn't. I just stood there, the weight of their betrayal sinking deeper, my anger mixing with a grief I couldn't name. When I turned back to the house, the dining room light was still on, their shadows moving like a play I wasn't in. I locked my apartment door behind me, the click loud in the quiet. My hands shook as I dropped my keys on the counter, the weight of last night's dinner still crushing me. Dad's words. "You're stable," echoed, each syllable a reminder that I was just a tool to them. I sank onto the couch, my laptop open to my bank account. The $500 transfer to Nathan stared back, a cold confirmation of their betrayal. I needed answers now. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Years ago, Nathan had shared his email password during a late-night study session back when we felt like allies. I'd never used it, but tonight, desperation won. I typed it in, half expecting it to fail. It didn't. His inbox loaded, a mess of unread messages, and my heart raced. I scrolled, searching for anything, proof, lies, something to make sense of this. Then I saw it, a thread from Mom's subject line, "Plan for Nathan." I clicked, my breath shallow. The emails laid it out, cold and calculated. Mom wrote about my steady job, how I'd never let family down. Dad chimed in, suggesting they lean on me for Nathan's business loans. One line from Mom burned into me. "She'll pay. Emily always does." My vision blurred, tears hot on my cheeks. They weren't just taking my money, they'd planned it like a business deal with me as the collateral. I kept reading, each email worse. Nathan bragged about dodging creditors, laughing off his debts. Dad replied, "Don't worry, we'll handle Emily. Handle me." Like I was a problem to manage. Then a bombshell, an email about our family cabin, the one place I'd felt whole as a kid. They'd sold it last month to cover Nathan's overdraft without a word to me. My hands clenched, nails biting my palms. That cabin was my refuge, summers by the lake, Mom teaching me to braid flowers, Dad showing me how to skip stones. Gone for Nathan's mistakes. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest heaving. The room spun, and I stood pacing to keep from screaming. My phone buzzed, Sarah checking in. I ignored it, too raw to talk. Instead, I grabbed my coat and drove to the hospital, needing somewhere safe, somewhere mine. The break room was empty, the hum of the vending machine steady. I sat staring at the wall, my mind a storm. They'd stolen my past, my future, my trust. How could they? Sarah burst in her scrubs, wrinkled her eyes sharp. You look like hell, Em. What happened? I couldn't hold it back. The words spilled Nathan's emails, the cabin, their plan to bleed me dry. Her face hardened and she grabbed my hand. That's not family. That's theft. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through Nathan's social media, her fingers flying. Look at this, she said, shoving the screen at me. A post from yesterday, Nathan at a steakhouse toasting with Lily, captioned, "Living the dream." My stomach churned. He was celebrating while I paid for his life. Sarah kept scrolling, her voice rising. And here his new watch, his car upgrades. All on your dime. Each photo was a punch proof of his lies piling up. I thought of the cabin, its wooden porch where I'd carved my initials at 10. They'd sold it without a thought, like my memories were worthless. My tears fell silent but heavy, and Sarah hugged me, her grip fierce. You don't owe them anything, she whispered. I pulled away, my resolve cracking. I needed to face them, to make them see me. I drove to my parents' house, the road blurring through my tears. Their lights were on, music spilling out, a family barbecue in full swing. I parked, my hands trembling, and walked to the backyard. Nathan stood by the grill, flipping burgers, his laugh loud. Mom passed out drinks, Dad chatted with neighbors. It was perfect except for me. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but clear. Nathan, we need to talk. He turned, his grin faltering. The crowd hushed, eyes on us. I didn't care. I know about the emails, I said louder now. I know you're using me to fund your life. His face froze. Then he laughed, sharp and mean. What, Em? Playing the victim again. My heart pounded, but I kept going, listing every loan, every lie, my voice breaking. Mom gasped. Dad stepped closer, but I wasn't done. The backyard went silent. The crackle of the grill, the only sound. Nathan's laugh hung in the air, sharp and mocking, as he stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You're making a scene, Emily. Always so dramatic. His voice dripped with scorn, and the neighbors shifted, their whispers buzzing like wasps. I stood my ground, my hands clenched, my voice steady despite the tremble. Dramatic. You've been draining me for years, and they helped you do it. Mom rushed forward, her face pale, her hands fluttering. Emily, stop this. You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing them. My chest burned, the weight of her words crushing. I turned to her, my eyes stinging. You sold the cabin, Mom. My cabin. For him. Her mouth opened, then closed, guilt flashing across her face before she looked away. Dad moved beside her, his jaw tight. That's enough, Emily. You're out of line. Out of line, I laughed, a raw, broken sound. I'm out of line. You planned this. I saw the emails. You told Nathan I'd pay his debts, that I'd never say no. The crowd gasped, and Lily, standing near the picnic table, clutched her drink, her eyes wide. Nathan's smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of panic, but he recovered fast, crossing his arms. You hacked my email, real classy sis, digging through my stuff because you're jealous. Jealous. The word hit like a slap, and I staggered, my breath catching. Jealous, I whispered, my voice breaking. I worked double shifts to buy Mom that necklace you gave Lily. I skipped vacations to pay your loans. And you call me jealous. My tears fell hot and unstoppable, but I didn't wipe them away. Let them see. Let them all see what they'd done. Dad stepped forward, his voice low, commanding. Emily, you're strong. You can handle this. Nathan needs us right now. You don't. His words were a blade slicing through the last thread of hope I'd clung to. Strong. It wasn't a compliment. It was a sentence, a demand to keep carrying their weight while they praised Nathan's dreams. Mom nodded, her eyes pleading. We didn't mean to hurt you, honey. It's just how things are. How things are. I looked at them, Mom's trembling hands, Dad's stern frown, Nathan's smug tilt of his head, and felt something snap. The family I'd loved, the one I'd sacrificed for, was a lie. I turned to Lily, who looked frozen, her fingers twisting the pearls. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She shook her head, tears welling, but Nathan cut in, his tone sharp. "Don't drag her into your pity party, Emily." The neighbors murmured, some turning away, others staring like I was a spectacle. I felt exposed, raw, like my heart had been ripped open for everyone to judge. I wanted to run to hide, but my feet wouldn't move. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low, venomous. "You love playing the martyr, don't you? Poor Emily. Always giving, never getting. Maybe if you weren't so boring, we wouldn't need to lean on you." Boring. The word echoed, cutting deeper than I thought possible. My knees buckled, but I caught myself, my hands shaking. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to defend me, to say something, anything. But Mom stared at the ground, and Dad crossed his arms, his silence louder than Nathan's insults. The truth crashed over me, cold and final. They'd chosen him. They always would. I turned and walked away, my vision blurring, the backyard fading behind me. My heart pounded, each beat a scream I couldn't release. I reached my car, my hands fumbling with the door, and sank inside, the world closing in. I was alone, stripped bare, with nothing left but the wreckage of a family that never truly saw me. I drove home from the barbecue, the road blurring through my tears, Nathan's words, boring martyr, cutting deeper with every mile. My parents' silence was worse, a confirmation they'd never choose me. I parked outside my apartment, the engine ticking in the quiet, and sat there, hands gripping the wheel. The world felt too big, too heavy, but something stirred inside me, small but stubborn. I wasn't their pawn anymore. I couldn't be. Inside, I dropped my purse and sank to the floor, my back against the couch. The apartment was dark, the hum of the fridge my only company. I pulled out my notebook, its pages filled with grocery lists and shift schedules, and started writing. Not a list, a letter. To them. My hand shook as I scrawled, each word a release. "I've given you everything," I wrote. $10,000 for Nathan's loans. $2,000 for your emergencies. I'm done. I paused, my pen hovering. The truth needed more than numbers. I flipped to a new page and taped a photo from my wallet, the family cabin, its porch glowing in summer light. Under it I wrote, "You sold my heart for him. I deserved better." My chest ached, but the words felt right, like reclaiming a piece of myself. I sealed the letter, my resolve hardening. They'd hear me whether they wanted to or not. My phone buzzed, Sarah again. I answered this time, my voice raw. "I'm done, Sarah. I'm writing them a letter." She whooped, her excitement a spark in the dark. "That's my girl." "What else you doing?" I hesitated, then said, "I need to protect what's mine." She told me about a financial advisor she knew, Rachel, who helped her after a bad breakup. "Call her tomorrow. Lock your money down." I nodded, scribbling Rachel's number, a plan forming. The next morning I called Rachel, my voice steadier than I felt. She agreed to meet at a coffee shop, her office too booked. I arrived early, clutching a latte, my letter tucked in my bag. Rachel was warm, her glasses slipping down her nose as she listened. I told her everything, the loans, the cabin, the bank alerts. Her eyes narrowed. "They're exploiting you, Emily. Let's secure your accounts first." She walked me through, freezing my credit, changing passwords, and opening a new account they couldn't touch. Each step felt like armor shielding me from their reach. Rachel leaned back, sipping her coffee. "I had a brother like Nathan. Always charming, always broke. I cut him off 5 years ago. It hurt, but I found my life." Her words landed soft but heavy, like a truth I'd been chasing. I thought of Marcus, his story of freedom, and now Rachel. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I was enough. I left the coffee shop, my steps lighter, and drove to the post office. The letter felt heavy in my hands, its edges sharp. I hesitated at the mailbox, my heart racing. Sending it meant no going back. I thought of Nathan's smirk, Mom's averted eyes, Dad's dismissal. I dropped the letter in the slot, clanging shut, and exhaled. It was done. They'd know I saw them, that I wasn't invisible anymore. Back at my apartment, I called the hospital and asked for Marcus. He was in the break room, his mop leaning against the wall. I sent a letter, I told him, my voice firm. Told them I'm done. He grinned, his eyes crinkling. Proud of you, Em. You coming to the support group tonight? I'd dodged it before, too raw, too ashamed. But now? Yeah, I said. I'm in. He nodded like he'd known I'd get there. I hung up my hands steady for the first time in days. The letter was a start, but I needed more. I opened my laptop, searching for a lawyer. The cabin sale nagged at me. Something about it felt wrong, like they'd hidden more than just the sale. I found a local firm and emailed asking about property fraud. It was a long shot, but I had to know. I closed the laptop, my pulse quickening, a fire growing inside me. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was fighting. I walked into the support group, the community center's fluorescent lights casting a soft glow over the circle of chairs. My stomach churned, but Marcus's nod from across the room steadied me. I sat clutching a paper cup of coffee, its warmth grounding. The group was small, 8 people, their faces a mix of weariness and hope. Tara, a woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile, introduced herself as the facilitator. We share what we're ready to, she said. No pressure. When my turn came, my voice wavered but grew stronger. I spoke of Nathan's debts, my parents' emails, the cabin's loss. The words poured out raw but clear, each one lifting a weight I hadn't named. Tara listened, her gaze steady, and when I finished, she said, You're not alone, Emily. I lost a sister to greed. It hurts, but you're already stronger than you know. Her words sank deep, a seed of belief I hadn't felt before. After the meeting, Tara handed me a blank journal, its cover a soft blue. Write your story, she said. Not theirs. Yours. I took it, my fingers tracing the spine, and nodded. Driving home, I felt different, lighter, like I'd claimed a piece of myself back. The journal sat on my passenger seat, a quiet promise. I'd spent years being their anchor, but now I wanted to be my own. The next day, I booked a therapy session, something I'd always dismissed as not for me. The therapist, Dr. Ellis, had a calm voice and a cluttered office book spilling off shelves. I sat on her couch, my hands twisting, and told her about the letter, the cabin, Nathan's smirk. She asked, Why did you always say yes? The question hit hard, and I fumbled, tracing back to childhood, to Mom's praise when I shared, to Dad's nod when I fixed things. I thought it made me enough, I admitted, my throat tight. Dr. Ellis leaned forward. You're enough without their approval, Emily. What do you want for you? I didn't have an answer, not yet, but her words stuck, a challenge I couldn't ignore. I left her office and stopped at a stationery store, buying a pen with a smooth grip, one that felt like it belonged in my hand. At home, I opened Tara's journal and wrote my first entry, I want a life that's mine. The words looked bold, real, like a map I was starting to draw. My phone rang. Nathan. I stared at his name, my pulse spiking. I answered, keeping my voice even. What do you want? He launched, in his tone slick, asking for a quick loan to cover a supplier. I cut him off. No, Nathan. Handle it yourself. He laughed, sharp and bitter. You're really doing this? Throwing family away? I gripped the phone, my resolve iron. I'm not throwing anyone away. I'm choosing me. I hung up my hands steady, his voice fading like a bad dream. The lawyer I'd emailed responded, asking for documents about the cabin. I spent hours digging through old files, finding a deed with my name as co-owner, something I'd forgotten from when Dad added me at 18. My heart raced. The sale might be fraudulent. I scanned it and sent it over, my fingers trembling with possibility. If they'd forged my signature, I'd fight for what was mine. Not just the cabin, but my voice, my place. I stood in my kitchen, the journal open on the counter, my new pen beside it. The apartment was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. I thought of Tara's strength, Dr. Ellis's question, Marcus's pride. They saw me not as a fixer and as Emily. I picked up the pen and wrote another line. I'm not invisible. I closed the journal, my breath slow and sure, and looked out the window. The world was still there waiting, and for the first time I felt ready to meet it. I was restocking bandages in the hospital supply closet when the door swung open. Mom stood there, her purse clutched tight, her face a mix of anger and something sharper like fear. Emily, we need to talk, she said, her voice low, eyes darting to the hallway. My stomach twisted, but I nodded, setting the box down. I'd sent the letter 3 days ago, cut Nathan off, and locked my accounts. I knew this was coming, but it still felt like walking into a storm. We stepped into the break room, the smell of burnt coffee thick in the air. She sat across from me, her hands fidgeting, and I braced myself. "Your letter," she started, her voice trembling. "How could you write those things? Accusing us of stealing from you." Her words stung, but I held her gaze, my heart steady. "I wrote the truth," I said, calm but firm. "You planned to use me." I saw the emails. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You had no right to snoop. That was private." Private. The irony burned, but I didn't flinch. Private, like taking my money, selling the cabin without telling me. She looked away, her lips tight, and the silence stretched heavy and cold. I waited, hoping for an apology, a crack in her defensiveness, but none came. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice dropping. "You've humiliated us. Nathan's devastated. He moved back home because of you." I blinked, the words landing like a punch. Devastated Nathan, who'd laughed off my sacrifices, was the victim now. I thought of his call, his demand for a loan, his bitter, throwing family away. My hands clenched under the table, but I kept my voice even. He moved back because his business failed. Not because of me. Mom shook her head, her eyes glistening. "You don't understand, Emily. He needs us. You're breaking this family apart. Breaking the family." The accusations settled like dust, choking me. I thought of the support group, Tara's quiet strength, Marcus's nod of pride. They'd seen my worth when my own mother couldn't. I wanted to scream that I'd been the one holding us together, but my throat tightened and I stayed silent. Mom stood her chair, scraping, and tossed a folded paper on the table. "Your father's too angry to see you. Think about what you've done." She left the door, clicking shut, her footsteps fading down the hall. I unfolded the paper, my fingers slow. It was a note from Dad, short and sharp. "You're no daughter of mine until you fix this." My breath caught the words slicing through me. I'd expected anger, but this disowning me felt like the ground crumbling. I tucked the note in my pocket, my hands shaking, and leaned back, the break room walls closing in. The family I'd fought for had turned their backs, and the weight of it pressed hard, stealing my air. I left the hospital early, my shift half done, and drove to a park near my apartment. The air was crisp, the leaves crunching under my boots as I walked to a bench. My phone buzzed, Lily, Nathan's ex, her name a surprise. I answered, wary. "Emily." "I'm so sorry." She said, her voice soft, rushed. "I didn't know about the necklace, the money, any of it. Nathan lied about you, said you were bitter, selfish. I broke up with him." Her words were a flicker of light, but they couldn't touch the cold inside me. I thanked her, my voice hollow, and hung up. Lily's apology was kind, but it changed nothing. My parents' rejection, Nathan's blame, sat heavy, a truth I couldn't outrun. I pulled Dad's note from my pocket, rereading it under the fading daylight. The words blurred, my eyes dry but burning. I'd taken a stand, but the cost was this, a family that didn't want me unless I paid their price. I sat on the park bench, Dad's note crumpled in my hand, the evening chill seeping through my jacket. The park was quiet, save for a distant dog barking and the rustle of leaves skittering across the path. Lily's call lingered, her apology a faint echo against the void my parents had left. I folded the note and slipped it back into my pocket. Its words, "No daughter of mine," carving a hollow space inside me. I'd fought to be seen, but the cost was a family erased. My phone stayed silent. No calls from Mom, no texts from Nathan. The absence was louder than their anger, a confirmation they'd let me go. I walked back to my car, the streetlights flickering on, casting long shadows. At home, I found a voicemail from the lawyer, her voice brisk. "The cabin deed shows your signature, but it looks inconsistent. We're investigating fraud." Fraud. The word felt sharp, a blade I hadn't expected. If they'd forged my name, it wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. I sank onto my couch, the room dim, the hum of the radiator a soft pulse. The lawyer's words spun in my head, but they couldn't fill the quiet. I thought of the support group Tara's journal, the pen I'd bought to write my own story. I reached for it now, flipping to a blank page, but my hand froze. What was my story? Without them, I'd been daughter, sister, fixer. Now I was nothing, a ghost in my own life. The next day, Marcus found me in the hospital cafeteria, my tray untouched. He sat across his eyes, searching. Heard you missed your shift yesterday. You okay? I shrugged, stirring my coffee, the spoon clinking against the mug. They cut me off, Marcus. Dad says I'm not their daughter. My voice was flat, but my chest ached, the truth heavier than I'd expected. He leaned forward, his voice low. My dad did that too when I stopped paying his bills. It hurts, but it passes. You're more than their name. His words were kind, but they didn't reach the cold inside me. I nodded, forcing a smile, and he squeezed my shoulder before leaving. Alone, I stared at my phone, the screen blank. No one else had called, not neighbors from the barbecue, not cousins I'd grown up with. The silence was a wall built by my choice to stop paying, to stop bending. I'd wanted freedom, but this felt like exile. Later, I went to the support group, the community center's warmth a contrast to the frost in my chest. Tara noticed my quiet and sat beside me, after her voice gentle. You look like you're carrying a mountain, Emily. I told her about Dad's note, the lawyer, the silence. She listened, her eyes steady, then said, My mom stopped talking to me for a year when I set boundaries. It felt like dying. But I found people who saw me, not my wallet. She hugged me, her arms a brief anchor, but the ache remained. Back home, I opened my mailbox and found a package small and unmarked. Inside was a childhood drawing I'd made, a stick figure family under a rainbow, my name scrawled in crayon. No note, but I knew Mom's handwriting on the address. She'd kept it all these years, only to send it back now, like returning a piece of me she didn't want. I held it, my fingers tracing the faded lines, and my throat closed. This was their answer, not words, not apologies, but a quiet final cut. I set the drawing on my counter, its colors stark against the dark wood, and stood there, the apartment still. The lawyer's call. Marcus's support. Tara's warmth. They were lifelines, but they couldn't touch this grief. I'd taken my stand, and the world had shifted, leaving me on the other side of a chasm I hadn't seen coming. My family was gone, and all I had left was the echo of a life I'd thought was mine. I walked through the park near my apartment, the late afternoon sun filtering through the oaks, casting dappled shadows on the path. My boots crunched on gravel, a steady rhythm against the quiet. In my bag was a letter from Dad, arrived yesterday, asking to meet alone at a cafe. His handwriting was shaky, the words brief but heavy with something like regret. I hadn't replied yet, my heart caught between caution and a flicker of hope I didn't trust. The air smelled of damp earth and fading summer, and I settled on a bench by a small pond, its surface rippling with the breeze. I pulled out the letter, unfolding it carefully as if it might break. I want to talk, Emily. Just us, he'd written. No apology, no explanation, but the softness in his tone was new, unfamiliar. I tucked it away, my fingers lingering on the paper, and watched a duck glide across the water, its wake spreading wide. I'd spent the week rebuilding small steps, stacking into something solid. At the hospital, I'd signed up for an art class, something I'd loved as a kid, but dropped when Nathan's needs took over. The flyer promised watercolor lessons, and I'd pinned it to my fridge, a quiet rebellion against the years I'd put myself last. I'd also started volunteering at a community center, helping kids with homework, their laughter a balm to the ache I carried. My phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Carter, my landlord, inviting me to dinner. No excuses, Emily. Your family now, she'd written. I smiled, warmth spreading through me. Mrs. Carter was a widow, her apartment filled with photos of her kids, now grown and distant. Last week she'd shared a story about her son, how he'd borrowed money for years until she said no. I lost him, she'd said, her voice steady. But I found myself. Her strength felt like a mirror reflecting a path I was starting to walk. I stood stretching and wandered to a flower bed bursting with marigolds, their orange petals bright against the green. I knelt, touching the soil soft and cool under my fingers. Gardening had been Mom's thing, not mine, but I'd bought a small pot of herbs for my balcony, a tentative step toward creating something of my own. The basil was thriving, its leaves fragrant when I brushed them, and each time I watered it, I felt a quiet pride, like I was learning to nurture myself. The lawyer had called yesterday confirming the cabin sale was fraudulent, my signature forged, likely by Dad. The news should have hurt, but it didn't, not like before. I'd told her to proceed to reclaim my share, but I'd already decided to sell it. The cabin was a memory, not a home, and I wanted to let it go to build something new. The money would fund a dream I was still shaping, maybe a house, maybe a trip, something just for me. I sat back on the bench, pulling out a small sketchbook I'd bought for the art class. My pencil moved, tracing the pond's curve, the duck's gentle arc. I wasn't good yet, but the act of drawing felt like breathing a space where I could be without owing anyone. A jogger passed, her ponytail swinging, and I wondered what her story was, what she carried. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in my own. The letter from Dad sat heavy in my bag, its weight a question I wasn't ready to answer. I wanted to believe he'd changed, that he saw me, but trust was a fragile thing, and I wasn't there yet. I closed the sketchbook, my fingers smudged with graphite, and took a slow breath. The park was still, the light softening, and I felt a calm settle, not peace, but close, a moment where I was enough just as I was. I left the park as dusk settled the sky a soft purple, and drove to the cafe to meet Dad. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my heart flickered, caught between curiosity and caution. The cafe was small, its windows glowing, the smell of fresh bread spilling out as I stepped inside. Dad sat in a corner booth, his shoulders hunched, a coffee untouched before him. He looked older, his eyes tired, and for a moment I saw the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, not the one who'd forged my name. I slid into the booth, my sketchbook tucked in my bag, a quiet anchor. "You wanted to talk?" I said, my voice even not cold but not warm. He nodded, his fingers tracing the mug's handle. "I messed up Emily," he said, his voice low, rough. "We leaned on you too hard. Nathan, he's got charm, but he's fragile. We thought you could handle it." His words were soft, but they didn't land like an apology, more like an explanation he hoped I'd accept. I listened, my hands folded, the hum of the cafe fading. I wanted to feel something, anger, relief, anything, but I just felt distant, like I was watching us from across the room. "You chose him," I said, not accusing, just stating. "You sold the cabin, used my money, and never asked me." He flinched, his eyes dropping. "We thought we were helping him stand up. We didn't see you falling." His voice cracked, and I saw a glint of regret, but it wasn't enough to bridge the gap. I leaned back, my breath slow. "I needed you to see me, Dad. Not as the strong one, but as me." He nodded, his lips tight, but he didn't speak, and the silence grew heavy but not hostile. I thought of the kids at the community center, how their eyes lit up when I helped with math, of Mrs. Carter's warm kitchen, of my basil plant thriving on the balcony. My life was small, but it was mine, and it was growing. Dad reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, sliding it across the table. "Found this in storage," he said. I opened it, a silver charm, a tiny book from a bracelet I'd loved as a teen. I'd lost it years ago, or thought I had. "You used to read under the cabin porch," he said, his voice soft. I held the charm, its weight familiar, and my throat tightened, not with pain, but with a quiet ache for what we'd been. I didn't forgive him, not yet, but I didn't need to. I slipped the charm into my pocket, a piece of the past I could carry without letting it define me. "Thanks," I said, and stood my chair, scraping softly. "I hope you find a way to fix things with Nathan. But I'm done fixing it for you." His eyes met mine, a flicker of understanding passing between us, and I walked out, the night air cool against my skin. At home, I sat on my balcony, the city lights twinkling below. My basil plant stood tall, its leaves catching the moonlight. I opened my sketchbook and drew it, each stroke deliberate, my hand sure. The charm rested on the table, not a tether to them, but a reminder of who I'd been, a girl who loved stories, who dreamed beyond her family's weight. I closed the book, my breath even, and leaned back, the stars above, steady, quiet enough. I woke to the soft hum of my alarm, the morning light slipping through my blinds in thin golden strips. My apartment smelled of coffee brewing, a ritual I'd started months ago, a small act of care for myself. I was 30 now, a year past the barbecue where I'd shattered under my family's weight. The scars were still there, but they'd faded like ink smudged by time. I slipped on a sweater, its wool soft against my skin, and stepped onto my balcony, the city waking below. My routine had shifted, carved from the quiet I'd found after letting go. Each morning I watered my herb garden, parsley and mint, now joined the basil, their green leaves a stubborn kind of hope. I'd taken to baking two simple things like scones, their buttery scent filling my kitchen on weekends. The act of measuring flour, kneading dough, grounded me, a reminder that I could create without owing anyone. Work at the hospital felt different now. I still worked long shifts, but I'd set boundaries, saying no to extra hours when I needed rest. My coworkers noticed Marcus, especially his grin wide when I joined him for coffee breaks instead of rushing off. "You're living for you now," he said last week, and I'd nodded, the truth settling warm in my chest. I'd started mentoring new nurses, sharing tricks I'd learned, their gratitude a quiet mirror of my own worth. The community center had become my second home. I taught math to kids twice a week, their pencils scratching as they solved problems, their shy smiles a gift. One girl, Mia, reminded me of myself at 10, eager, overlooked. I brought her graph paper, showed her how to plot stars, and when she hugged me, her arms tight, I felt a piece of my old wounds mend. Helping her, I was helping the girl I'd been, the one who deserved more. Mrs. Carter invited me to dinner most Sundays. Her table crowded with mismatched plates, her stories a steady rhythm. She'd started calling me her daughter, not in a heavy way, but light like a truth we both understood. Last month she'd given me a recipe card for her peach cobbler, her handwriting looping across the paper. I'd framed it, hung it in my kitchen, a small monument to chosen family. The cabin case had closed. I'd won my share, the lawyer confirming the forged signature, but I sold the property, the money now in a fund for nursing scholarships. It wasn't about revenge. It was about turning pain into something that lasted. I'd driven to the lake once, stood where the cabin used to be, and felt only calm, the water lapping steady against the shore. I didn't need to hold on to it anymore. I'd stopped waiting for Mom or Nathan to call. Their silence, once a wound, was now just a fact, like the weather. I'd heard Nathan was working odd jobs, his charm dimmed by reality, but I didn't reach out. My life was too full for his shadow. I'd bought a new necklace, a simple silver chain with a small crescent moon chosen for no one but me. It rested against my collarbone, cool and light, a reminder of who I was becoming. I sat at my kitchen table, a mug of coffee warming my hands, and opened my sketchbook. My latest drawing was of Mia. Her head bent over her math, a star pinned to her shirt. The lines were soft, imperfect, but mine. I closed the book, my gaze drifting to the herbs, their leaves catching the sun. The world felt steady, not perfect, but enough. I took a slow sip, my breath quiet, and let the morning hold me whole and still. I stood in the community center's small garden, the late afternoon air cool, my hands dusted with soil from planting tulip bulbs with the kids. Their chatter had faded as they ran off, leaving me alone with the turned earth and a quiet that felt like home. I brushed my palms clean, the grit lingering under my nails, and sat on a wooden bench, the wood worn smooth by years. My life was different now, not loud or grand, but steady, built from choices I'd made for myself. Yesterday I'd framed a photo from the art class, a watercolor of a river, my first finished piece. It hung above my desk, its blues and greens catching the light, a reminder that I could create beauty without anyone's permission. I'd started writing letters, not to my family but to myself, tucked into a box under my bed. Each one held a truth. I was enough, I was allowed to rest. I didn't need to carry their burdens to be loved. I thought of Nathan, his life a shadow I no longer chased. A coworker had mentioned he'd moved to a new town, starting over, but I didn't ask for details. My heart didn't race at his name anymore. It just beat steady in mine. Mom had sent a card last month, a brief note about her garden, no mention of the past. I'd read it, set it aside, and felt no pull to answer. Forgiveness wasn't a gift I owed them, it was a choice I made for my own peace, a door I left cracked but didn't walk through. Tara had invited me to a book club, a small group that met in her living room, their voices warm over cups of tea. Last week we'd read a novel about a woman rebuilding after loss, and I'd spoken up my voice clear about finding strength in letting go. The others nodded, their eyes kind, and I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was living fully in a way I'd never known. Marcus had thrown me a birthday party, a quiet gathering with cupcakes and laughter, and I'd blown out the candles, my wish simple to keep this life, this me. I'd started running not far, just a loop around the park, my sneakers pounding the path as the sun rose. Each step was a claim, a way to feel my body, my breath, my right to take up space. I'd bought a small telescope too, set it up on my balcony to watch the stars, their light, a map of something vast I was part of. These were my anchors, small but heavy, holding me to a life I'd chosen. The lesson came slowly pieced together in these quiet moments. Family isn't a debt you pay with your soul. Love, real love, doesn't ask you to shrink so others can shine. I'd spent years believing my worth lay in giving, but I'd learned to give to myself first, to my art, my time, my dreams. The world didn't end when I said no. It opened wide and waiting. I wasn't perfect, but I was whole, and that was more than enough. I stood the garden still, the tulips hidden beneath the soil, waiting for spring. I walked home, my steps light, the evening wrapping around me like a soft blanket. My life was mine, and I was learning to love it one slow, deliberate day at a time. What's a moment that made you realize your own strength? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join me in finding light through the cracks. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to healing, to growing, to being enough just as we are.